Hello, guys. Welcome back to another episode of our podcast, Philosophizing with a Hammer. Today, we're continuing our series about Friedrich Nietzsche. And in the previous episodes, we explored the concept of the hammer, the proclamation that God is dead, the will to power, and most recently, the Übermensch. These concepts have been stepping stones towards understanding Nietzsche's philosophical vision. Today, we tackle one of his most enigmatic and challenging ideas, which is the eternal recurrence. So, I'm going to start by making you picture this out. What if you had to live your life over and over again, an infinite number of times, in exactly the same way? Would you embrace it, or would you crush it? To understand the eternal recurrence, let's briefly connect it to what we have already discussed. In the episode on God is Dead, we talked about the loss of absolute values and the resultant vacuum. The will to power, as we later explored, is Nietzsche's proposed response, a drive to create meaning and assert life despite this vacuum. Then come the Übermensch, which is the ideal individual who overcomes nihilism by affirming life fully. For further details, I would really recommend listening to the previous episodes because they set up the stage to this one. Now, the eternal recurrence. It puts this affirmation to the ultimate test, the affirmation that overcoming nihilism is granted and achieved by affirming life fully. So, Nietzsche introduces the concept of the eternal recurrence in the Gay Science, and later revisits it in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. So he doesn't present it merely as a cosmological theory, but as a thought experiment, a challenge that asks, can you say yes to your life exactly as it is forever? Now, imagine a demon visits you. As Nietzsche describes it in The Gay Science, it whispers into your ear, here I'm going to quote from The Gay Science, "This life, as you now live it and have lived it, you'll have to live it once more and innumerable times more, and there will be nothing new in it. But every pain and every joy and every thought and sigh must return to you, all in the same succession and sequence." End of quote. How would you respond? How would you respond, and how would you react to this question, to this theory, and let's call it a proposition by the demon? Well, let's break it down first. Consider the profound weight of this statement. It is not just a poetic musing. No, it's a radical confrontation with existence. The demon's words eliminate any hope for escape, progress, or ultimate salvation. There is no afterlife where wrongs are righted, no future where you can undo your regrets. Instead, you are locked in an infinite loop of your life, exactly as it is. Every choice, every moment, every consequence. Nietzsche is asking, can you bear this thought? Or better yet, can you embrace it? So this idea isn't about literal repetition. Nietzsche isn't suggesting a metaphysical theory where the universe reflects and resets itself like a cosmic tape loop. No, instead, the eternal recurrence serves as a thought experiment and a psychological and existential test. If you were to live every joy, every triumph, but also every failure and pain eternally, could you still affirm your existence? The challenge is not to despair, but to cultivate a mindset so resilient, so life-affirming, that you can respond with a resounding yes to the demon's proposition. Think about what this means in practical terms. Every decision you make takes on infinite significance. For example, that fight you had with a loved one, that moment of kindness you shared to a stranger, that career path you chose or abandoned, all of it would play out endlessly. There is no erasing, no rewriting. The eternal recurrence strips away illusions of finality, and it forces you to confront your life as it is, in its raw and unfiltered reality. But this isn't just about passively accepting your life. Nietzsche's concept is about radical affirmation, saying yes, not only to the good, but to the totality of your experience. It's about embracing the pain and the joy. It's about the mundane and the extraordinary as equally necessary and vulnerable. So, in this sense, the eternal recurrence isn't a burden, it's a call to live with a purpose and intensity. If you knew that every moment mattered infinitely, how would you live? How would you strive to create a life that is so meaningful, so beautiful, that you could want to relive it forever? You see, this ties deeply into Nietzsche's broader philosophy, which is the ultimate test to the will to power. It asks us to transform our existence into something worth affirming. It is also the proving ground for the Übermensch, who not only accepts the eternal recurrence, but revels in it, let's say. To the Übermensch, life isn't a trial to be endured, but a work of art to be celebrated. Long story short, just make the best of your life, of your everyday life. Choose your options and make your choices wisely as if you're going to relive them forever. So, going back to the demon's question, how would you respond? How would you respond to that question by the demon? Would you say yes? Would you rise to the challenge, embracing your existence with all its imperfections and glories? Or would you shrink away in horror, unable to bear the weight of infinite repetition? So, let's link this to the Übermensch. The Übermensch is someone who doesn't accept the eternal recurrence but welcomes it with joy. This isn't resignation but an ecstatic, let's say, embrace of life. In a sense, the eternal recurrence is the ultimate test of the will to power. Can you harness your creativity and your energy to make your life so meaningful that you would want to relive it forever? That's the main question. The concept of the eternal recurrence challenges us to see life not in a linear journey leading toward some distant goal, but as an infinite cycle of moments that can be revisited eternally. It is not about being trapped in repetition, but about the profound responsibility that comes with realizing the weight of every decision, every action, every thought we have. Nietzsche isn't suggesting that we literally live the same life over and over again, but rather he's urging us to treat each moment with the gravity it deserves. If we could choose to live this moment eternally, would we find it meaningful, fulfilling, and worth reliving? Living intentionally means aligning our choices with a deep affirmation of our existence, regardless of the challenges or uncertainties that come with it. It's easy to drift through life, waiting for something external to change or for life to offer us something better. But Nietzsche's eternal recurrence calls on us to be proactive, let's say. Instead of deferring to a future where everything will be better, it asks us to create meaning in the present moment. It's a radical invitation to transform how we engage with life, a suggestion that we must embrace our present choices and make them count as if they were to be eternally recurring. You see, this is one of my favorite ideas by Nietzsche. The fact that you have to ask yourself this question whenever you make an important decision in your life, you ask yourself, am I ready to live up to the consequences of what am I going to do now for eternity, forever? It really makes you consider what you're about to do. This idea also flips the notion of fate. Rather than seeing our lives as something dedicated by forces outside of our control, eternal recurrence empowers us to take full responsibility. The idea that we could live like this, this very day, this very moment, forever, isn't a burden, but a liberating to call and affirm and also create our own lives. Nietzsche pushes us to ask ourselves, can I look at my choices, my actions, and my life with pride and say, I would relive this moment over and over again willingly? You see, this question at its core is an invitation to live authentically, to embody values and choices that make our lives meaningful, regardless of what the world might throw at us. As we explore Nietzsche's philosophy, let's take a moment to see how his ideas connect to the thinkers who came long before him. Because the concept of eternal recurrence has deep roots in ancient Greece, especially in the philosophy of Heraclitus. Heraclitus, actually one of my favorite philosophers, believed that everything is in constant motion. And the idea of constant motion and perpetual change feels like a spiritual predecessor to Nietzsche's vision of a world that repeats itself endlessly. You see, Nietzsche was clearly inspired by Heraclitus and other daring pre Socratic thinkers who paved the way for everything we understand today. And actually, as soon as we finish with our journey with Nietzsche, we'll circle back to these philosophers like Heraclitus and we'll live into their groundbreaking ideas that still speak to us across the centuries. Now, speaking about Heraclitus, born in 6th century BC, this pre-Socratic philosopher is often remembered for his motion and doctrine of flux, the idea that everything is in constant change. He famously states that you cannot step into the same river twice. So, what did he mean by that? Well, for Heraclitus, the river is always changing, and so are we. The water flows, the environment shifts, and even the elements within us, the thoughts, the feelings, and the physical body, are in a constant state of transformation. The river is never the same, not because it's made of different water at any given moment, but because everything, including the river itself, is evolving from being to becoming. And I guess this rings a bell when we talk about the concept of becoming, as far as Nietzsche is concerned. We already talked a lot about that with the idea of the will to power and the Übermensch. So, Heraclitus didn't see change as something negative or disruptive, like many of his contemporaries did. Rather, he believed that it was the very nature of life and of being. He famously referred to penta, which means everything flows. For Heraclitus, this idea that everything flows and this constant flux wasn't a chaotic or disorienting force. It was a foundational principle of existence. Change is the ultimate constant. In fact, he saw this perpetual flux as a form of harmony, not the disorder. And the tension between opposites, life and death, light and dark, good and bad, all of them it was a necessary part of the universe order. Without this conflict, without this flow of change, there would be no movement, no growth, and ultimately no life. Now we turn to Nietzsche. In many ways, he carried this torch of flux into his own philosophy. But rather than just embracing the idea of change, Nietzsche took it a step further with what we have been discussing so far with the eternal recurrence. You see, for Nietzsche, change wasn't just something that happens. It was something that has to be affirmed. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence, in a sense, is deeply connected to Heraclitus' view of flux. But while Heraclitus observed that everything is in flux, Nietzsche went a step further and asked, here I'm going to quote, what if that flux, that endless change, could be relived forever? End of quote. In other words, what if everything we experience, the triumphs and the struggles and the joys, the heartbreaks, everything, were not just a transient moment in time, but eternal and recurrent cycles? Nietzsche wasn't just fascinated by the idea that things change. He was deeply concerned with what it would mean for us if we had to relive that change exactly as it happened over and over again. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence forces us to face our lives with a kind of radical responsibility. If every moment, every decision, every heartbeat were to repeat eternally, would we affirm it? Would we want to live this life not just once, but infinitely? This, in many ways, is Nietzsche's most extreme test for our ability to embrace the vision that Heraclitus gave to the world. Heraclitus thought that everything is in flux, but Nietzsche asks us, can you love that flux, even when it brings suffering, loss, and hardship? So, can you look at your life as it is, in all its impermanence, and still say, yes, this is worth repeating over and over again? This brings us to one of the most important philosophical challenges Nietzsche presents with eternal recurrence. It is not just about acknowledging the ever-changing nature of the universe. It is about accepting the totality of existence, embracing the ebb and the flow of all of this, with no desire to escape from it. Nietzsche famously called for the creation of philosophy that was life-affirming. He didn't want us to merely tolerate life and its changes. He wanted us to embrace them, to embrace all of life, its beauty, its chaos, its suffering, and its fleeting moments, knowing that this is the only life we have, and that we must live it fully, as if we would live it forever. The idea of eternal recurrence, when we think about it in the context of Heraclitus' flux, reveals something truly profound about Nietzsche's philosophy. Heraclitus' vision of a world in a flux might seem chaotic or unsettling, but Nietzsche, inheriting this idea, transforms it into a philosophical tool for liberation. While Heraclitus saw the change as inevitable, Nietzsche saw it as an invitation to affirm our existence in the face of the unchangeable law of change. In a sense, Nietzsche's eternal recurrence is Heraclitus taken to its radical extreme. If everything is in flux, if life is in constant motion, then what would it mean for us to love this motion, to embrace it fully, and to live in such a way that we would choose to relive every moment, every joy, every sorrow for all eternity? This isn't just a thought experiment, it's a challenge to how we live right now. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence isn't merely about the fact that life changes, it is about how we choose to respond to that change. And whether we say yes to it, even in its most painful and fleeting moments. So, to tie this back to Heraclitus, the philosopher of flux shows us that change is the very essence of the universe. But Nietzsche pushes us further, asking not just how we can live in a world of flux, but how we can live with love for that flux. The eternal recurrence becomes the ultimate test of how much we can truly embrace our existence in all of its impermanence and affirm it as something worth repeating forever. And here is where Nietzsche's philosophy of the Übermensch, or the overman, comes into play, something that we have discussed in the previous episode. But just to refresh our memory a little bit, the Übermensch, we said, is the person who is capable of living a life that affirms the eternal recurrence. The Übermensch is someone who doesn't just passively endure the ebb and flow of the existence, but actively shapes and embraces it. In many ways, the Übermensch embodies Nietzsche's vision of Heraclitus' flux, a figure who is both fully active, fully alive in the present moment, and unafraid to live that moment over and over again eternally. In conclusion to the relationship between Heraclitus and Nietzsche, this is one of the deep philosophical kinships, but also a development of ideas. Heraclitus showed us the reality of flux, the eternal dance of change. Nietzsche took that idea and turned it into a challenge to live not just in flux, but to love it, to affirm it, and to embrace it with every fiber of our being. And in doing so, he gave us one of the most profound ways to engage with life, the eternal recurrence. A powerful invitation to live fully as if we were to relive our lives forever. As we have discussed, Nietzsche's idea of the eternal recurrence is more than just a philosophical thought experiment. It offers a profound way to confront some of the darkest challenges of modern existence, one of which is nihilism. Nihilism, at its core, the belief that life lacks inherent meaning or purpose. It emerges as the absence of a higher power or universal truths, often leaving us feeling that existence is empty and fleeting. And in our modern world, nihilism can feel all too real. We live in an era where many of the old systems that once provided answers, whether through religion, morality, or societal values, have started to crumble. With the rise of scientific reasoning and the decline of traditional metaphysics, the existential question, what is the meaning of life, becomes increasingly difficult to answer. In the absence of a clear purpose or direction, life can seem insignificant, like a brief and inconsequential, let's say, moment in an indifferent universe. For Nietzsche, nihilism is not something that we should simply accept or all win. Instead, it is something that we need to overcome. Nietzsche believed that instead of searching for meaning in some external truth or higher power, we must create meaning ourselves. Like what you have been discussing so far with the concept of the eternal recurrence. At first glance, this idea of eternal recurrence might seem like a dark or even hopeless vision of existence. After all, the notion that everything in our lives will repeat infinitely could appear suffocating or overwhelming, let's say. But Nietzsche turns this idea on its head. He challenges us with a powerful question. Can you affirm your life just as it is, knowing that you have to live it forever? This is where the eternal recurrence directly confronts nihilism. It asks us to take responsibility for our lives, to live in a way that we would want to repeat for all eternity. Rather than passively waiting for life to reveal some greater meaning, Nietzsche pushes us to create meaning in each moment. The question posed by eternal recurrence is not a theoretical one. It is a deeply personal one. It forces us to ask whether we can affirm our lives, even with all the imperfections, struggles, fleeting natures, and can we look at our choices, our actions, and our values and say, yes, I would love to live like this, to relive this again and again. You see, the challenge here is not to escape the repetition of life, but to fully embrace it, to make every action, every moment, every situation that you have been into an expression of our deepest values and desires. And by confronting this idea, Nietzsche offers us a way of the existential trap of nihilism. Instead of resigning ourselves to the idea that life has no inherent meaning, eternal recurrence invites us to find meaning in the very act of living. It pushes us to live with intention, to take full ownership of our choices, and to invest our lives with purpose. In the face of nihilism, this becomes a radical act of affirmation. It is not about waiting for meaning to appear, but about creating meaning in every action we take. Every choice, every relationship, every struggle becomes an opportunity to affirm life and to shape the world according to our will. The concept is basically a tie, and a tie closely related with Nietzsche's idea of the will to power, which is the inner drive to assert ourselves and our values in the world. For Nietzsche, overcoming nihilism doesn't mean passively accepting life as it is. It means actively shaping it, creating our purpose, and forging our own path. Eternal recurrence, in this sense, is not a sentence. It is a challenge. It is a call to live authentically, to reject passivity, and to embrace the full responsibility of creating the meaning in a world that may not provide it. In Nietzsche's view, overcoming nihilism requires us to face life in its entirety, not just the parts we find pleasant or convenient. It means acknowledging the suffering and uncertainty, while also affirming the joy and beauty of existence. Eternal recurrence invites us to embrace both the light and the dark aspects of life. And in doing so, we find a deeper sense of meaning that we could ever find through external sources or objective truths. It teaches us that life's meaning is not something waiting to be discovered. It is something we must create for ourselves through the choices we make and the values we uphold. So, when faced with the overwhelming sense of meaninglessness that nihilism can bring, Nietzsche's eternal recurrence offers us a radical way forward. It doesn't offer some external solution, but instead it challenges us to become the creators of our own meaning, to make our lives worth living in such a way that we would gladly repeat them for eternity. In this process, we transcend nihilism by taking up the mantle of creation, embracing our responsibility, and affirming the beauty and complexity of life in all its forms. In this way, Nietzsche's eternal recurrence offers a path out of nihilism, a path of active engagement with life, where meaning is something we make, not passively wait for. Through this process, we don't just overcome nihilism, we learn to thrive in a world that gives us no inherent answers, and that in itself is a truly empowering realization. And from a personal experience, this has definitely helped me a lot, overcome nihilism and find meaning in life. And I hope it does the same for you too. You might ask the question, how? How can we apply the idea of eternal recurrence in our lives today? Well, how do we take this powerful concept and not just treat it as an abstract philosophical idea? To begin with, let's consider the basic challenge of eternal recurrence. Nietzsche doesn't simply ask us to acknowledge that everything recurs. He asks us to imagine that everything in our lives, every moment, every decision, every experience, is something we would be willing to relive over and over again for all eternity. It is a question that forces us to reckon with our lives in a way that is brutally honest, deeply self-aware, and full of responsibility. But how can we practically engage with this idea in the modern world? Well, a world, you might say, that is fast-paced, distracted, and often filled with uncertainty. The first way to apply eternal recurrence is to begin with our choices. Nietzsche challenges us to live as though each moment is eternally significant. When you wake up in the morning, think of it not just as another day, but as that one exact day could recur infinitely. How would you approach your responsibilities, your relationships, your passions, your actions? Would you still make the same decisions if you knew you would face them over and over again? How often do we make decisions out of habit, not out of intention? How many of us feel like we are just waiting for the next big thing, the next stage in our life? Nietzsche is asking us to fully engage with the present. And by applying the eternal recurrence, we force ourselves to confront whether our daily choices are truly affirming of our existence. Are we living with passion, with purpose, or are we letting time slip by? Imagine, for example, a decision as simple as deciding how to spend your free time. Would you be willing to relive the way you spend your evenings day after day for all eternity? If not, then what would you change? Would you prioritize more meaningful activities? Spend more time with the people you care about? Pursue your creative passions? Apply this kind of reflections to all aspects of life. If you had to live your daily life over and over again, would you be proud of what you did and how you spent it? Now, this isn't just about maximizing pleasures, but Nietzsche's eternal recurrence asks us to consider the struggles and the sufferings. Often, we think of suffering as something to be avoided or something that we hope will be resolved in the future. But eternal recurrence challenges us to embrace suffering as a part of the total experience of life. In a world that often encourages us to escape pain through distractions, consumerism, or short-term pleasure, Nietzsche's philosophy flips this idea on its head. If you had to relive your struggles, your failures, your pain again and again and again, could you affirm it? Could you find value in them? even if they were difficult? Could you accept them as part of your story and say yes to your existence? You know, we have discussed last time about the Übermensch and how Nietzsche famously states in Twilight of the Idols, what doesn't kill me, make me stronger. Applying this concept today means changing how we approached adversity. It means no longer running from difficulties, but recognizing that they are too a part of the flow of life, just as Heraclitus taught. Instead of wishing for our problems to disappear, we might find ourselves asking, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this experience? How can I transform this moment into something meaningful? The eternal recurrence asks us not to shy away from life's challenges, but to embrace them with the same vigor and passion as we would embrace moments of joy and success. This is the radical affirmation of life Nietzsche speaks of. It is all part of the experience. Another crucial way to apply the eternal recurrence is by learning to live in the present moment. It is easy in today's world to get caught up in future goals, social media distractions, or worrying about what others think. But Nietzsche's eternal recurrence reminds us that our lives are happening now. And this moment is all we truly have. It is not about waiting for some idealized future. It is about truly inhabiting the present with all its beauty and its messiness. So, most of the time we treat life like a checklist. I'll be happy when I get that promotion. I'll live fully once I have that perfect relationship. I'll enjoy life when I have more time or more money. But the eternal recurrence flips that attitude again. It asks us, what if today, right now, is the moment that matters most? How would your life change if you started viewing the present moment as something eternal? The eternal recurrence invites us to drop the illusion that we can always get to some better place in the future and instead focus on affirming the present. By applying this, we begin to live with greater intensity, awareness, and mindfulness, recognizing the value of every small action, every interaction, every thought. I remember I was watching one of Jordan Peterson's videos. I'm not very much of a fan of this guy, but I like this video specifically. One of his students asked him, I'm very terrified of the future. What if I don't get a good job? What if I don't have a good life? I'm very, very terrified. And Jordan Peterson's answer was so amazing. It was very Nietzschean. He said, if you're doing whatever you think needs to be done every day, if you're not wasting your time every day, if you're living in the present moment as, let's say, life-affirming as it should be, then you shouldn't be afraid of the future. Know that the very thought of being afraid of the future and embracing the present moment is itself a reassurance. You see, do what needs to be done every day and the future will take care of itself. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence also helps us see that meaning isn't found only in grand accomplishments or peak experiences. Sometimes the deepest meaning can be found in the ordinary, the daily moments, the simple act of making a cup of coffee, the quiet conversation with a friend, the moment you watch the sunset. These can become sacred moments if we learn to appreciate them fully. If you had to relive these moments forever, how would you experience them differently? In today's world, we are often so preoccupied with the extraordinary that we forget to appreciate the beauty in the ordinary. The eternal recurrence challenges us to notice the small things, the everyday moments that make life meaningful. It is not just the big events we celebrate, but how we live and perceive the small, seemingly insignificant moment. Nietzsche's philosophy is all about self-creation, self-overcoming, and living authentically. To apply this in the modern world, we need to regularly ask ourselves, am I having the life I want to live? Am I true to myself? This involves not only evaluating our external circumstances, but also by taking a hard look at the way we think and the beliefs we hold and the assumptions we carry. If we had to live our lives over and over again, should we be proud of who we've become? Would we be able to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, I am the person I choose to be in every sense? In our contemporary society, self-criticism can be difficult, especially with the pressure of societal expectations. But Nietzsche's eternal recurrence calls us to reflect deeply on who we are and whether we are living authentically or if we have simply fallen into the patterns of others' expectations. To truly live according to the idea of eternal recurrence means actively shaping our lives, creating a vision for who we want to become, and pursuing that vision with relentless commitment. In conclusion, applying Nietzsche's eternal recurrence to our daily lives means embracing challenge, responsibility, and the beauty of the present moment. It challenges us to live intentionally, to accept life's inevitable struggles, and to create meaning in every moment. It is about looking at our lives with honesty and saying, yes, I will live this life again and again for all eternity. Not just the good moments, but every moment. It is a powerful invitation to live fully, to affirm our existence in its totality, and to never take a single moment for granted. So, I challenge you today, take a step back and think, would I want to live this day again eternally? And if not, what would I change? What would I do indifferently? This is the true power of Nietzsche's eternal recurrence, not just as a thought experiment, but as a way to live more consciously, more fully, and more authentically. The eternal recurrence invites us to live boldly, creatively, and intentionally. As we continue our journey through Nietzsche's philosophy, let this idea resonate. What would it mean for you to affirm your life as it is forever? Thank you for listening. If this episode sparked any thoughts or questions, I'd love to hear them from you. Don't forget to follow and subscribe the show so it can appear for others too. Share and leave a review if you enjoy our discussions. Until the next episode, keep questioning, keep creating, and above all, keep affirming life.